Namaste and greetings. I, Ritvika Malik, research at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. We are gathered here for the second day of Ending Gender-Based Violence Cohort 2, Awareness of Policies and Governance, an online national spring school program, a 4-week online immersive certificate training course. This training program is organized by IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center. The chair of this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, New Delhi. This program has an excellent panel of experts who will be sharing their experience for the duration of this program. The distinguished expert panel includes Advocate Dr. Flavia Agnes ji, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida ji, Dr. Vahida Nainar ji, Professor Bijay Lakshminanda ji, Professor Veena Vaswani ji, Miss Anju Dubey Pandey ji, Dr. Padma Deosthali ji, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, Maya Avasthi ji, Advocate Celine Thomas ji, Professor Soumya Uma ji, Dr. Kirti Bolineni ji, Advocate Audrey De Mello ji, Miss Nandini Sarkar ji, and Mr. Harish Sadani ji. The panel of conveners comprises of Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigamji, Visiting Senior Fellow IMPRI, Advocate, Author and Researcher Gender and Human Rights, Professor Gumadi Sridevi ji, Visiting Professor IMPRI, Dr. Simi Mehta ji, CEO and Editorial Director IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji, Director IMPRI. Continuing with our commitment to fostering awareness and actionable insights, I extend a warm welcome to all participants engaging in this crucial discourse on ending gender-based violence. I express gratitude for your keen interest and dedication in investing time, energy, and effort towards comprehending the intricate landscape of policies and governance surrounding this pervasive issue. Your participation plays a pivotal role in uniting practitioners and enthusiasts alike, creating a collaborative space for impactful policy research and advocacy. Thank you for your invaluable contributions to this transformative course. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind perusal. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be Q&A session after each presentation. Share your question on the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. Refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. Now, without any further ado, let us start the program. It is my honor and privilege to invite the chair for the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to start the program with her opening chair remarks. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, we can't hear you. I think you are on mute.
Thank you, Ritvika, for this introduction. We owe our thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Ms. Vaishali Singh, Dr. Ms. Priyanka Negi, Vidita Satyam Tripathi, and Ritvika. And welcome Dr. Albertina, Dr. Vahida Nainar, Dr. Shalu Nigam, today's resource persons. Yesterday, we had a very interesting inaugural address by Advocate Flavia Agnes with the overview by me, and we summarized the whole decade, 40 years of campaigning against gender-based violence by the women's movement in India, and the decade of 80s that was marked by campaign culture in which women's groups of different priorities and ideological positions had to evolve, network amongst themselves to combat powerful patriarchal forces operating within the institutions of family, society, state, and communities. Among the political groups and civil liberties groups, violence against women became a hotly debated issue in the post-emergency period. Excesses of authorities on the women political prisoners, and later on the whole injustice meted out to Mathura rape case, and which resulted in a national anti-rape movement. Flavia vividly explained the processes of self-mobilization by women and how women interacted with the laws and public policies and demanded change in the antiquated rape law. She also gave examples of fight against domestic violence, obscene portrayal of women in media, then the difference between sex work and forced prostitution, and the responses of the different women's groups and democratic rights organization who highlighted sexual violence against poor and helpless women during the communal riots, caste riots, or at the time of any kind of a social tension, and how the organizations in Delhi, Bombay, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Goa, Calcutta, they resulted in petitions and public interest litigations against violence against women. And we had a series of legal reforms over the last 40 years. Now, even the issues, we are started seeing the women's question and the gender-based violence beyond gender binary, and the persecution and injustices meted out to LGBTQIA community was also there. There was question in the question answer session. The participant also asked questions regarding the gender minorities and the newly emerging women's groups. We have learned a lot during this 4 decades, and that legacy needs to be continued. The slogan which women's movement gave, personal is political, how the day-to-day personal problems are determined by the overarching patriarchal domination. There was a discussion on what is toxic patriarchy. And we also, Flavia, in a very lucid style, she profiled the awareness about policies and legislation that the collective endeavor of the women's movement resulted in. Dr. Shalu Nigam discussed grave injustices done to women survivors of sexual violence by the criminal justice system in the series of judgments in the recent past, starting from the Gujarat riots, also Kathua rape case, and the allegation of child sexual abuse against Asharam Bapu, and the demonstration which women had organized just day before yesterday in a big way. So what kind of backlash is that we are getting, and what is the accountability of the governance structure? That was a very important question that emerged. Now, today's 3 discussions are also going to be extremely useful in terms of gaining insight and also gaining confidence that though the reality is bleak, if we all get united, we can bring the transformative changes. So Dr. Albertina's session today about the analysis and critical reflection on gender policies, and Dr. Vahida Nainar's thing on work on a global level, and also examination of CEDAW, Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and Dr. Shalu Nigam's legal hands-on as they were yesterday. Today also we will have far more deeper understanding on the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your thorough recap of yesterday's events and your guidance as we embark on the second day. On that note, we are now progressing towards our initial session of the day on locating policy approaches to addressing gender-based violence. I am delighted to invite Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida ji, lawyer and human rights activist, Goa, visiting senior fellow IMPRI, to take the floor. If you could kindly take it from here, ma'am.
Thank you. Before I proceed to share a PPT, I'd like to speak a little about my own entry into this whole area of ending gender-based violence, and to say how I got in. Meaning, normally women's groups in the past have got in with addressing cases of violence against women, in that sense. But the way we got in here, many of us were part of other general groups, other groups like trade unions, civil liberties movements, students organizations. And in those organizations, issues that women were facing, it was felt were not getting addressed. And that's how we felt that there was a need to form a women's rights group. To start with, the first one that was formed in terms of rights groups. And that is when one of the key issues at that time for us was the way women in Goa, I come from Goa, and the way women in Goa are projected to the rest of the world. And therefore, the consequences, because women are projected as easily available as sex objects, Goan women as sex objects. And so we felt the need to address that issue. That was something that all of us had stakes in, those of us who had got together. So therefore, what we did was to question those projections of women. So there used to be something called carnival parades. And so we questioned this carnival parades where women were made to, like, as advertisements for the hotels or advertisements for tourism in Goa. In these parades, there used to be floats. As part of these parades, it used to be a floats parade. And the women were expected to send flying kisses to the crowd. Women were expected to dress in were it's not a question of what should be the right of women, but women were deliberately reduced to sex objects and expected to dress in a particular way for the purpose of, so women were commodified for the purpose of tourism. Now, the consequence of this is one aspect which is an issue by itself about commodification of women for tourism, or commodification of women at all. But the consequence of this also was that tourists presumed that women in Goa are easily available. And so if we walked on the streets, we faced the consequences of these kinds of projections, because people would think that they can just touch you, that you're there. Goan women are available. So if you're walking, they saw women on the street, and the kind of dress that women in Goa wore then as compared to the rest of India was different. So the response would be that they're available. So it's okay to touch, to nudge while walking on the pavement or on the street. So this was the thing. So now, if we wanted to address this issue, it was not enough to go to a police station and address the issue. Because first of all, the tourist, you're not going to be able to catch that tourist. He's nudged and he's gone. You see, so it was a little complex in terms of how to address this issue. So we at that time we had like exhibitions, poster exhibitions, to show what is exactly happening. And therefore, we felt that the issue had to be addressed at a macro level in terms of interrogating an organization of these stage managed parades where women are commoditized. So here was an approach which is not an approach to an individual case. It was a larger comprehensive approach where one is trying to address what is why. This is not to say that anybody is justified in nudging somebody, saying, look, I saw those parades, so I am able to, so I should, I saw those parades and I thought that women are available, so I can nudge them. No, we are not justifying it. But at the same time, these projections are adding to the problem. So therefore, any projections that commodify women or that make women out to be easily available, or that make women out to be sex objects, needs to be challenged. So why I'm saying this is because there are various approaches to dealing with violence against women. And it is not to say that we should privilege one approach over the other, but it is necessary to take into account all these various kinds of approaches in dealing with violence against women. I will begin to share a PPT now. Okay. It's visible to you all, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, so this is about locating these policy approaches. So, what does one?
And bottom
Uh-huh.
left, go to bottom left. There you will see the keys.
Bottom left.
Yeah, yeah. बिल्कुल extreme में मैम. No. Just hover. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now there are various approaches that people follow in addressing, that are followed by governance and by organizations in trying to address violence against women. So one approach is the social norms approach. The social norms approach is because there are these, as if there are these, invisible classes by which people have, through which they've come to consider certain behavior as acceptable and appropriate. So therefore, there are these social norms and they kind of normalize and legitimize violence against women. Therefore, a social norms approach is about calling out the gender insensitive social norms by identifying them, and then because those social norms result in gender based violence, the norms, there is a cause and effect in that sense, though of course there's nothing so clear in that always, but broadly, because these legitimize gender based violence, these norms have to be identified and changed. And this is done through research, sensitization, just keeping this here, research, sensitization, and orientation programs that work towards transforming these social norms. So there are gender sensitization programs, etc., that try to look at look at how people perceive a situation of violence, or how they seek to justify a situation of violence, and then address it and show how violence cannot be justified under any circumstances. Yeah. So, I mean, just giving you examples of some norms that are there. So, when there is gender-based violence, so people say, oh, she asked for it by her behavior. She was being extra friendly with people. She was like laughing out loud, etc. So therefore, people must have thought that she's like available. Then there are others who say, like when it comes to domestic violence, you will find that there's a social norm. When she's married, she shouldn't be talking to other men freely. She shouldn't be confiding in other men. So if she confided in them, then for one, that justifies the other person in terms of him sexually harassing her or intimidating her, and it also justifies her husband saying that you are having an affair with other men, and so I can be violent to you. So this is a kind of another kind of a norm. Then you have this character assassination. She's a loose woman. So therefore, it's so a loose woman can, what you call, quote unquote, loose woman can face gender-based violence, or that she invited the sexual violence by address, or she comes late home from work or wherever. So then, that she comes late from home from work. So therefore, if she's coming late, women are supposed to be in by a particular hour. And this is the kind of reactions there were, if you remember, in the Nirbhaya case as well. And so if she comes late home from work, then I mean, she's asking for problems outside also and inside the home also. She's asking for gender-based violence. So if she goes out with her boyfriend, like for example, she was coming home from Nirbhaya's case, so then it was like, oh, she went out with her boyfriend. Like, why did she have to go out like this and come home late, etc. So the thing is that these kinds of thing that women asked for this problem, and the kind of attitude in addressing it kind of legitimizes it. So therefore, the social norms approach tries to address these, to kind of unpack these norms. So, for example, if we say that a woman invited sexual violence by a dress, then a social norms approach will try to unpack it and say, look, there are studies which show that women with burqa, a full burqa where only the eyes can be seen, get raped. So this sexual violence is not about, lust. It is about it is an act of power. Then, where you show that if men are skimpily dressed as against women who happen to be skimpily dressed, men, if the outlook is totally different towards a man who is skimpily dressed, as against a woman who, if by any chance somebody were to touch a woman were to touch that man's private part, it would be seen as a I mean, people would look down on that woman. Whereas if a man does that to a woman who is skimpily dressed, they'll say she invited it. So there are these double standards, and we need to unpack those standards, and then therefore also change the norms that, dress doesn't cause it. The onus is on the perpetrator. He has his own spine, for example. So the social norms approach tries to unpack these social norms and to change behaviors, to change what constitute appropriate, acceptable actions by individuals. Now you have, that is the social norms approach. But if you only change behaviors, you may not be able to address the whole problem. If there are no support systems for the woman, because if it's about talking about changing behaviors, it doesn't mean that if you talk about changing behaviors, that behaviors change. Also, as I said, sexual harassment is an act of power. So whether it is, you can see this in terms of also I mean, in the case of the Bilkis Bano rape case, one knows very clearly that sexual harassment was an act of power. So you see that there is it is not about changing it's not about perceptions and changing behaviors. They wanted to assert their power. So if there are these things, just merely trying to say that norms should change will not help. So therefore there is a need to address to have an institutional approach also, so that there are systems where women can seek redress to address violence against women, where there are support systems that they can have. So the crux is that there should be an institutional support so that women are safe, can live a life with dignity, and have a well-being, and have equitable access to services. Now, this means addressing the structural realities and processes that determine the distribution of power and resources. Now, we do have the laws that legitimize secondary status to women, whether by active discrimination or by not providing specific safeguards. So you see that the distribution of power is skewed. So for example, when it comes to property rights, now you see that there are laws which do not give equal property rights to women, or if they give equal property rights to women or to all genders, they do not weave in special safeguards so that women or the oppressed genders are able to access those rights which are guaranteed in the law. There have to be some enabling provisions, special safeguards. But you find that in that sense, by not providing safeguards, these laws end up legitimizing the secondary status to women. So now if this is the reality, then that reality needs to be addressed. And you have to make sure that in terms of governance, we do not have laws that legitimize. We have to look at reforms in the laws. Now, you also need support systems, as I said. So there needs to be facilitation, because now, for example, if there's a case, a woman went to lodge a complaint at the police station. We know that there have been many judgments also now that say that women should be able to have support services from that point where she comes to lodge a complaint at the police station, for example. She should have support, because if she comes to the police station, she doesn't know for example, a woman who's facing domestic violence, she just knows that this man is troubling her and she doesn't want this man. So she might say, I want I want her divorce, and she may go to the police station. Then somebody should be there to tell her that the police station is not a place for divorce. But yes, there are certain other laws that can help you to address the problem of violence if that's what you want. Or if you want to a divorce and you need a free legal aid lawyer because you cannot afford a lawyer, you can go to this person. So you need some support systems at the police station, and that there are judgments which have provided for this. Now you have all these systems in place. Then there are legal aid cells. So under the free legal aid services, the Legal Services Authority Act, there are provisions for free legal aid for women. Now this is distinguished. So we have also to ensure that when we have this institutional approach, we have also to make sure how is it interpreted. I remember that initially when we used to refer women to these legal aid cells, because they will be provided a lawyer who's available for whom they do not pay, but the government pays. Now at the legal aid cells, initially they were not used to this idea. They were used to the idea that legal aid cells are meant to provide legal aid to women, to persons who cannot afford. So they used to look at the woman. Sometimes she's wearing her best dress. She may have one good dress, but she's wearing that, and she goes there. And they think that, oh, she can afford. Where is her income certificate? It was known that it is difficult for women to get income certificates, because when you go for income certificate, they ask for income of the family, etc. And then you're back to square one, because his income is considered as your meaning is the income of the family. So then, and she's not maybe separated, she's not divorced. So therefore, this, she would have not got legal aid because of not having income. So therefore, there is a separate category of legal aid services, free legal aid for women. And then it's also taking into account that if you have free legal aid for women, it's not enough if you have a lawyer. So it took into account all these approaches. This approach took into account, and the engagement of women's organizations or support organizations with these systems looked at this, and these provisions are born out of that. They looked at it that, okay, if you provide a lawyer, it's not enough, because then you need sometimes the witnesses. They suppose they are people who are working in the field, for example. Now, if they're working in the field, they lose their day's job. So therefore, there needs to be some kind of payment for their travel. There needs to be some kind of support for them. So then these sorts of things are provided for. Or then there needs to be photocopying of some documentation or some photographs that may be taken on the mobile, etc. So then this is again another support that needs to be provided. So like this, looking at it from the survivor's point of view, these institutional approaches tend to and the survivors' engagement with the institutional systems, changes have been suggested, and that and in making reforms in how institutions and institutional supports are available for women. You also have gender-based violence has also been recognized as a public health issue, and therefore health centers may be specifically trained to address gender-based violence. Health centers and hospitals may be trained to address gender-based violence, to recognize it, and to channelize the once they identify that there's a woman before them who's facing gender-based violence, to kind of do referrals. So you have all these. This would constitute institutional approach to gender-based violence. Then now each of these approaches, as I mentioned earlier, are valid in their own right. But one can't say, oh, one is better than the other. All these approaches are in fact important. So we know, when we're talking of intersectional approach, we know that women have multiple identities. They're not just women. There are women with disabilities. Now, people with disabilities have problems as it is. But if they're women and they're disabled, then that adds up to another kind of situation. So therefore, the intersectional approach has been considered, for example, in how the laws have been formulated. So to enable assistance for accepting complaints of persons with disabilities, in Sexual Harassment of Women at the Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act, there are provisions, because you have to accept the complaint from the complainant, has to give the aggrieved person has to make the complaint. But if she, for example, has a is not cannot speak or cannot write, then the point is she can take a support person, and that person can lodge the complaint on her behalf. So now this takes into account these intersections of the woman, intersection of identities within the woman, that is a woman with disability. Then there could be, there have been situations where, like, women are poor, if they may be the sole breadwinners in their family, contrary to the impressions that only men are breadwinners. And if they're the sole breadwinners, if they face sexual harassment at the workplace, they had no choice but to succumb to it, because they needed the money which they would which the income that they would get from the job. So now if they needed that income that they would get from the job, if they've complained, they would have lost their job. Very often, you know how appointments letters go. So therefore, in these circumstances, there has been the Vishaka judgment, which has very clearly looked at this aspect and tried to safeguard and ensure that the woman does not lose her job as a result of making a complaint of sexual harassment at the workplace. So this judgment has very clearly recognized that right to sexual harassment, right to job, right to work includes, or right to practice or a profession or occupation of one's choice includes right to a sexual harassment free workplace. So this again has come forth from the judiciary in to kind of adopt this intersectional approach, recognizing that women might succumb to sexual harassment doesn't mean that they are accepting it, but they're succumbing to it, which is different from being consensual sexual relations. Now, so and also recognizing that again that sexual harassment is an act of power. Now, there are also other situations. For example, if there's a Dalit woman who faces, if you find that, at a large level, Dalit women are facing injustice, or minority women are being targeted now, for gender-based violence, then there are setups which we can explore. And in that sense, there are social justice committees which are there, which every panchayat is supposed to set up at the panchayat level, and their mandate also includes addressing issues of violence against Dalit women. So now these social justice committees must be activated. Many times they're either not set up, or if they're set up, they're just on paper, and they're activated when there's somebody raises an issue in a big way. We should ensure that these systems that were put in place, and which also have the potential for an intersectional approach, must be activated and operational and functional. It is our responsibility to ensure that, or if we are journalists, or if we are doing research, we have to interrogate how these systems or these committees that were thought of actually function. Are they set up? Do they function? Have they been provided the resources? These are issues that, even in the institutional approach, many times the law provides for setting up something, but there is no budget, or the budget is inadequate. Like the one-stop crisis centers in the institutional approach, when I was talking about the one-stop crisis centers, they have a measly budget for the social workers. So you'll only get people who at the start want, maybe unless they have a passion and a commitment, but otherwise it will be people who want some experience and they get some token, that is a very token amount that they get for all the education that they've been through, etc. So therefore, we have to, in our institutional approaches, intersectional approaches, make sure that drawing from the experiences of women, we have to make sure that these approaches do not remain paper provisions, that they're actually active and effective. What are the problems with accessing those have to be identified and further finer changes made. That is how we've tried to at various points of time do this in women's groups, etc. These are the efforts that have been made. For example, a woman, if so let me just finish this intersectional approach. So you have you also have the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act, and which has special provisions where violence against women from SC/ST communities. Now here is where we were talking of intersectional approach. Now there is this thing also, that here we have all this for you. She's an object of development. So the women no agency, they don't participate in they have no possibility. It is like we will design the mechanisms to help you, a kind of a charity approach. There is a problem with such an approach because it is not designed keeping in mind the problems that women face. For example, if they decide that you will have a women police station which is operational only during the day, it doesn't take into account that when women face domestic violence, that a lot of it could be faced at night because the spouse is out during the day at work. And second is that if you have the police station saying, no, you come to the police station and make a complaint. Now, it doesn't take into account the fact that if a woman may not have the transport and may not have the possibility in that situation that she's going through to come to the police station, or the neighbors, they may not want to show up or have also the facilities to go to the police station and complain that this woman is facing domestic violence. So women must have agency in designing systems that are there. Survivor-centric approach. This is where I was coming to, whether it is institutional approaches, social norms, whether it is intersectional approaches. How is the survivor experiencing the systems? How is the survivor experiencing the behavioral, the changes in behavioral norms in terms of in terms of having the violence against her redressed? How are, sometimes it may not be an individual survivor, it may be mass survivors, like in a communal pogrom, in a genocide. So then how are they experiencing the approaches to addressing the violence that they have been through? How are they experiencing the systems? Based on that, what further to be done? Is it the other systems bigger than the actually creating more problems, or are they addressing it, but you need finer details, because very often the devil is in the detail. So a survivor centric approach therefore helps. I am a little biased, so when it's a comprehensive approach, I am calling it a feminist comprehensive approach, because it is about looking at something. In my opinion, feminist approach is about looking at a problem holistically. So feminists, there is, I'm just reading here from what feminist theorizations of power consider. So it says, feminist theorizations of power consider the significance not only of society, culture, and human behavior, but also of state bureaucracies, international governance, market logics, and many institutional influences upon norms and normativity. Consequently, it's about addressing micro issues, because in the macro we may miss out certain kinds of experiences that certain women face, and we may ignore those experiences because just a few women face those problems. So therefore, it's necessary to address the experiences, to address the experiences of gender-based violence and experiences of approaches to gender-based violence by individuals at a micro level, but to also address the macro level that makes this gender-based violence possible. So, for example, if people think nothing of commoditizing women, this is a macro level issue of, and across the world perhaps, where they think that you can weaponize women for something, and in that process the women get reduced to sex objects, and when they're reduced to sex objects, it feels like they're pliable. You can do what you like with them, and commoditize them and inflict violence against them, so therefore the macro and the micro need to be addressed. The market logics need to be addressed. For example, you have standard setters that expect women to conform, such as, these commercial beauty contests, which, for example, may say that a woman should have a particular kind of figure. And then you find that men are often, looking for women who conform that figure within as their partners. So sometimes, when they have, upon marriage, when they feel that women are not conforming to all those specifications of as set out in the beauty contests or in commercial films, then they resort to violence, because they want to say that you are not what a woman should be, and therefore you have to be, it's okay to beat you, and nobody will come to support you, because who will come to support, let's say, quote unquote ugly woman? Who will come to support a woman who is obese, as they call it? So, so these standards also decide what violence can be legitimized. They also create an atmosphere that women have to conform. They have to subject themselves to a whole lot of like not eating food, to kind of, be slim, not eating certain things to be slim, and they then also suffer from anorexia and these kinds of illnesses. So then these are larger forces at work that create certain expectations. They also create certain expectations of men. So men are supposed to be with six packs, these macho six packs men. Now, if men do not conform to those standards, they are not seen as real men. And then you find that a lot of men want to assert themselves and say that they are man enough, and they can conquer a woman. They can sexually harass a woman. They have the power enough, they are man enough to show their power over women. So you have these market logics, these macro logics that also create a setting for gender-based violence. Now, if we are really to address violence against gender-based violence, then whether it's women, sorry, I've often been using the word women, but I'm also looking at transgender, and I'm looking at other genders and various sexual identities. My point is to state that we have to we have to address gender-based violence from in a very comprehensive way. Take into account the intersectionality, take into account institutional approaches, take into account social norms, take into account specific individual experiences. So I wanted to share this with you. Like, when we say take into account specific individual experiences, I wanted to say that, like, I once heard of a case of violence against women, like mental torture, where the man used to, cut that a little portion of the chair on which the woman sits, so that she'll feel unbalanced and she'll feel that she's mentally unsound. So, and there's something wrong with her. Every day do it very insidiously. Now, you wouldn't think of this, you would, when you think of violence, you think of verbal abuse, you think of physical acts of violence, you think of gestures of violence. So you think of all these things which are being talked of as violence. Now this doesn't, you won't immediately think of this, but if somebody does this, so one has to be also on the guard for individual experiences of violence against women, because at the end of the day, one has to look at the particular context in which that woman is operating and what is happening to her, to pay attention to that and how she is experiencing gender-based violence. So therefore, individual approaches matter, intersectional approaches matter, institutional approaches matter, comprehensive approaches of addressing micro and macro and looking at norms from a gender lens, looking at human behavior, and how bureaucracies are operating, how international governance is playing out, how market logics are playing out from a gender lens also counts. So I will end here.
Thank you, ma'am, for your invaluable insights during this session and for providing essential context and perspectives. I would now like to invite our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, for her remarks on this session.
Yeah. Thank you, Albertina, for bringing out the collective wisdom of women's movement about various approaches which are complementary to each other, and that perspective is extremely important because perspective guides how you provide the helping hand to the survivors of violence, what kind of counseling you do, what kind of pathways you show for the future, and also how do you address the monolithic structures of the criminal justice system and the community. So many times, even in case of witch killing and honor crimes, in the communities are hostile to them. So I think once you have a clarity about perspective, then I think it becomes your day-to-day combat and day-to-day tactics, and also the long-term strategies become very, very effective in, and that's why our horizons about and sensitivity about the gender-based violence has also increased. There was a time during 80s and 90s we focused only on women, and now we have as Dr. Albertina told us, that we are going beyond gender binary. But I think she should give more examples of how women's movement and the self-help movement of the LGBTQIA community over the last 30 years have created a new kind of thinking among the lawmakers, so that we could have the inadequate, at least Transgender Persons Act 2019 with all the limitations of that law. But at least first time there is a collective effort to repeal Section 377, which was criminalizing the homosexuality.
Thank you, ma'am, for
That
guiding
is
us.
still a gray area so far as the discourse on gender-based violence are concerned.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, if I may add, if I can have a minute, I really think it needs a lot of attention, and in fact, I think that because there has been so much discourse around violence against women, the violence against transgender persons, trans women, is there isn't that kind of adequate discourse yet, and it needs therefore a very, very elaborate attention beyond even what it needs when it comes to violence against women. I myself would like to remember today a trans woman activist who passed away a few months ago in Goa. She was one of the foremost trans woman activists, but we all felt helpless in what we could do about her, because there are no homes for trans women activists to start with. For example, like you have homes for women, there are no homes for trans women activists. And when she was having health issues, we were her family took her and sort of addressed her, said that she was always a man and it is somebody who has played some tricks on her, etc. And then we realized that, how hopelessly we felt, because we didn't know that if we complained about the family imposing norms, about confining her, we would address that. But the whole question of institutional approaches. Now, what do we do? We will address that, but where will she go? Because she's having health issues, she needs to be taken care of. Where are the support systems for that? Individual people, individual activists and trans activists were ready to chip in, but there wasn't an institutional system to address it. So there are no homes for trans women to start with. I don't know about the situation in other parts of India, whether there are homes for trans women activists who have been, who have faced problems in their homes or in their settings. Yeah, just to
Do you have
share.
Garima Group in Goa? Garima Group you have?
No,
Garima
sorry.
Group, Dignity Homes by the
No,
state.
no.
There is a
We have
union budget has allocated funds, but the different state government, some have sent proposals, others have not. So once you send the proposal, you can start the home. Resources are there. Yeah. Bombay we have. In Maharashtra we have Garima Groups. Gujarat has
are there some are there issues with the specifications in those?
Yeah, the designing, yeah, the homes, like the either a rent or the government gives you a home, and then the funding for a unit cost per person for their daily survival, which is highly inadequate. So they
Yes, which is what now, for example, with mental health issues, the organization to whom they've outsourced it and they provide the support, the organization Street Providence here, they have been going in rallies to the government saying, and also the funds are released much later.
Much later, correct. Same
Even
in
for
the
one-stop
complaint
crisis centers. So people, how do people run these homes and run these spaces in that time? If they themselves are not,
they also have to source funding from crowdfunding as well as if they're techno savvy, and then also private sources, either CSR funds or other funds from civil society. They have to supplement it. Unit cost is very less. Only Kerala and Tamil Nadu have relatively better allocation. There is a question. Okay. Ishmit Kaur Chaudhary, can you unmute and speak?
Yes, thank you for this wonderful presentation. Actually, two major concerns, not a question per se, but observation. Like, there's a systemic commodification of women, particularly in the hospitality sector and particularly amongst the air hostesses. And off lately, I mean, it's in a way elating also. We've seen a lot of reactions and resistance coming in from many of these very young girls, who are refusing to take misbehavior of the men. So, of course, I mean, this kind of a thing that, okay, they are available, and rather, it's a very, very neat commodification in a very kind of a beautiful cover kind of a thing. And we all fall prey to that. Right. And I don't think there's much that, we have been able to do about it. Those sectors are extremely, extremely powerful sectors. And the second concern that I have is about, this maybe can be taken up as a form of question also, like, particularly when it comes to disabled women in the workspaces, there's hardly any sensitizing workshops or anything, being done at a systemic or an institutional level, and these women are, left to themselves to battle all kinds of behaviors. And along with, othering, the more problematic thing, what they face is oversympathy, people being extremely oversympathetic towards these women. So I think, I mean, we also need to focus in this area and kind of, have groups where these kind of things can be addressed. So in a way, I'm also making a list of, suggestions, which maybe I don't know if we would be discussing them towards the end, take away from the course where we can have some practical, solutions, move towards some practical solutions. So this I would be adding in there. But I would like you to respond to these two concerns.
Yeah, so as far as the hospitality sector, it has got a lot to do with the kind of image building, and also it's furthering on the whole demeaning of housework, not giving value to housework, thinking that that's the natural work of women. So when they're working there as women are working as air hostesses, it's like at the drop of a hat, the home system, the system in the home, get me a glass of water, so the same system is playing out here in the airplane, because this is a next level of the same work, if I may say that. So I do think that for this, therefore, we can't look at gender-based violence in isolation. We need to address the whole issue of commodification, the implications of commodification for women, not for women, but for men and for society. Because it is then that, and as you said, there needs to be sensitization. And then to send to the next question, there is sensitization. For example, the law mandates, the sexual harassment law mandates sensitization about the sexual harassment law, orientation and sensitization in terms under the sexual harassment law. Like this, either the laws must mandate it. I'm not very sure if the persons with disabilities law mandates orientation on being sensitive about disabilities. I'm not very sure about that. But if it doesn't, we have to make out a case for that. And it's also, the other thing is that the tendency is to leave it to, especially when there are these intersections, to say, okay, let the disability groups handle it. But I think it has to be an agenda of the women's groups as well. It has to be an agenda of human rights groups as well. Then there are also issues around this when it comes to in situations of communal violence. How their situation is taken advantage of, especially if there are mental health issues, etc. So I think it's important to kind of at one level to focus on the particular identity, and at another level also to integrate it in the examples we give. That is why today I was very careful of, still I mustn't have integrated a lot of identities, but I was careful to integrate certain identities that definitely surface time and again in terms of issues.
Yes, thank you for this. Thank you so much.
Pallavi Chakraborty ma'am has raised hand. Can you?
Yeah, ma'am. Good evening, and thank you for delivering your lecture in such a simple way. Because, for instance, I come from a field of English literature where I barely have idea about the juridico political, and I'm sort of familiarizing myself with it. So I just had two questions. One is that you talked about the Goa tourism, commodifying women's body. What I wanted to ask you is that, yes, on one hand, the patriarchy commodifies women's bodies, but on the other hand, we also have these women who have agency. For instance, if I want to show my body, there's agency in that. So there's also
Yes.
that twofold, there's that twofold view, or points of view from where we can look at that thing. So I would like your insight on that. And the other one is that you talked about so many approaches, and I was not familiar with any of them other than the feminist approach, because it is also a part of my subject. And what I wanted to ask you is that, though you talked about many approaches, can they be totally, segregated from each other? For instance, even if I'm talking about survivor-centric approach or intersectional approach, they're very much a part of feminist approach. So my question is that, can there be a total separation? And the other question I told you about, the tourism and objectification.
Let me put it this way. So your first question, sorry, let me answer the second question and then get back to what you raised first. So as far as the approaches are concerned, as I said, I'd like to consider that comprehensive approach as a feminist approach, which looks at all these approaches woven together. So, but the point is that somebody may call that a socialist approach because it's about considering everything together. Meaning, it's about being, so it's about what we label. So I don't want therefore to be caught within labels. Also, I think people are still allergic for all that it's worth. People are still allergic to the word feminist, etc. So we have to deal with that also. But at the same time, while we are addressing, we have also to be strategic. So I therefore say feminist, I say comprehensive approach towards addressing violence against women. But I also think why we have to talk about each of the other approaches, which all form part of the feminist approach, is because there is a tendency when we're looking at a comprehensive approach that we may marginalize any one of these approaches, as in it may not get the kind of attention we deserve within the comprehensive setting. Therefore, it's necessary to emphasize on each of the approaches and the values of each of those approaches, the attention that it needs, the social norms approach, the intersectionality, the institutional approach, the macro approach. Because also this is one thing, when it comes to the macro approach, there are very few who address it, the macro approaches. So therefore, my point in sort of sorting, in sort of highlighting them differently. Though I agree that feminist approaches, in my opinion, and how I perceive feminism, because again, different people have different, there are liberal approaches to feminism. There are other kinds of approaches to feminism, like, bland equality approaches to feminism. Women are the same, women as powerful as men. So you don't need special provisions. There are liberal approaches which will say that, which will not take into account maybe the contexts in which women are operating, and say, oh, it needs to be across the board everywhere. So therefore, the hesitation to just use labels, but to spell out specifically. The earlier question was about, you said about
Objectification.
agency. Yes. So this is a question that we have also been asked very often. And what we are saying is women have agency. So for example, when it comes to sex work, women have agency too. But when you say that that women are, they're not, it is like, I hire you, you may not even be agreeable to it. I bring you, it's like, you do traffic, how you traffic women. So women don't have job options and they resort to that, and that whole thing is packaged to convey a certain impression. So it goes beyond the agency of women. So we're not questioning a woman, you know, let's say, sending out flying kisses to the crowd in the parade. We're not questioning, we are questioning the packaging of the parade, the packaging of the floats, and to sell, what is it that they're seeking to sell through that packaging. So that is what we are questioning. So it's not about the agency of women. We're very clear on this, because there was this this question, that, for example, this question, this is something we got the nominated women MLAs to raise in the Legislative Assembly once. There were these, what they were doing is, the hotel was projecting an advertisement of the hotel, was a advertisement of the swimming pool, but the swimming pool was blurred in the background, and there was this woman sprawled, wearing a bikini. Now, what are we saying? So that is exactly what, was the reaction. That was a kind of reaction. There was a reaction from the government, the Minister for Tourism, saying, what you want? You expect women to wear saris when they go to the swimming pool? So we said, no, that is not what we expect. But when if you send a photograph of your house, you don't send a photograph of your bathroom and of you nude in the bathroom as a representation of your house.
Correct.
Because then you're commodifying what your house is all about. So for example, the hotels would advertise with this and say, so and so beach resort, a therapy for jaded nerves and tired eyes. So what is it conveying? It's kind of commodifying women. So it's not about the woman who's going by the swimming pool and then spreading herself on the around near the swimming pool and for sunbathing. It's not about that at all. So that's the difference. If I may, I don't know if I've made myself clear.
No, I've understood your point. What you're getting at is you're against generation of stereotypes. And
Yes.
yeah, so I understood. Thank you very much for answering my question, ma'am.
And also
Also,
using women's bodies as spare part for sale, no? Like for commercialization, commercial interest, you are objectifying, attracting more tourists.
ma'am, there is one more question by Kumarji. So, Kumarji is asking that media representation of women
Let him speak.
nowadays
Yeah, let
movies.
him speak. Let him speak. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Manish Kumarji.
Is he there? Yeah, he has written in the chat box, no? Yeah, you are reading.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Am I able to? Am I audible?
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, ma'am. I wanted to know, like, nowadays, media representation of women, how they are shown, and like movies like Kabir Singh and Animal, they are glorifying the toxic masculinity, and people are appreciating by going, like, look at the box office collections, one of the top grosser of the country. So in a way, there are movies. These kind of movies are contributing in the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes. What are the measures that can be taken, to keep a check on it, like what, like in the art form, because the director, they are saying that it's a kind of art form, it used to happen like this, no, so what should be the correct way, like?
That's a very good question and an interesting question. So there's been a lot of discussion. At one time, I would have been the first person to say, now we should have a law that that criminalizes any such projections. But realizing that we are operating within certain systems that are also not bias free, and that can use these very laws to subordinate your freedom of speech and expression. I would be careful about asking for criminalization of this behavior. I would rather, create work towards creating a groundswell for artwork that can for art movies even, that can impress and that create, let's say, feminist visions of society, or that interrogate this toxic masculinity. So I think it is a lot more challenging. It is harder because it's easier to draw a couple of laughs, a couple of and create a mob psychology of heroization of people, or heroinization of people for that matter. But but it is possible, I feel, and there have been films that have, if I understand right, I do think that there are films that people have created that that can be box office hits, and yet not be promoting toxic masculinity or oppressive oppressive traits. So I think that the effort needs to go in channelizing those, and at the same time having, let's say, cinefilm discussions which interrogate these stereotypes.
Understood.
Just my thoughts. I mean, I don't have 100% answers to anything.
Yeah, can I add a point here? Like the constitutional provision that freedom of speech, and there is this limitation to it. So, even if he goes via that kind of argument, taking constitutional values, so that may have, may provide some kind of insight. But again, again, it's a very tough
Because
issue.
it's so subjective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Which article of the Constitution we can?
19.
Article 19. 19, freedom of speech, Article 19(1) A, I think, yeah.
If there are any more questions, participants can raise their hand and or type their questions in the Q&A box.
We can go ahead. We have 2 more. We have already exceeded the time limit.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am, for guiding us through
2
our
more
first
sessions to go.
session and patiently answering all our questions. With this, we now move on to our next session on gender-based violence and medical evidence by Dr. Vahida Nayanarji, independent researcher, gender and human rights consultant, and senior fellow, IMPRI. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, but there may be a little confusion about my topic. It is not on medical thing. I'm talking about gender-based violence and Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination.
That's what is written, the timetable.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Vibhuti?
right. Yes,
Right.
that's
Okay, so now before we start, I would like to resolve a little bit of, let us decide how we are going to, it's almost time where my session was supposed to be ending now. So can we just allocate a time and I need to be, maximum I can give another 10-15 minutes, like up to 7:40 or so. Is that
Yes,
okay?
fine.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. And now I will share my screen. Yeah, but I got the past 10-15 minutes of the previous session. It was really interesting discussion. So, yeah. And I have
Full screen.
Yeah, let me make full screen. Okay, is that visible?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so as we clarified, the talk is on gender-based violence and CEDAW Convention. So CEDAW Convention, as we all know, is the is an anti-gender discrimination treaty of the United Nations. Its full form is Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and it was adopted in 1979. The interesting part about this convention is that there is absolutely no mention of the word violence in the convention, or violence against women, or gender-based violence. There's no mention at all in this convention. It is not clear why that gap is there, but this gap was rectified in 1992 through what is called the general recommendations. So any clarificatory statement on existing conventions and treaties are issued through what is called the general recommendation, or GRs, which are adopted by the General Assembly and therefore forms the part and parcel of the text of the convention. It has to be read together with it. So so they introduced this general recommendation, first one, which was 19. And in that, it talks about discrimination against women. It says, excuse me. Yeah, it says that discrimination against women, as defined in Article 1 of the Convention, includes gender-based violence, that is violence which is directed against women because she's a woman, or that affects women disproportionately, and such violation is a violation of their human rights. So this is the first time where violence against women was read into CEDAW Convention and termed that this kind of violence is included in the Article 1 of the Convention in the term discrimination against women. Now, for following that, this was just reading a definition of violence against women into the discrimination provision. More recently, rather in 2017, another general recommendation, number 35, was introduced that basically updates general recommendation number 19. And the key points of this recommendation number GR 35 is that it first expands the scope of the violence against women that is referred to in GR 19. And it says that it recognizes that such violence is a manifestation of discrimination against women and violation of the right. In its definition, it emphasizes that gender-based violence includes acts that results from in physical, sexual, psychological, or economic harm or suffering to women. So it clarifies the definition further. It acknowledges the root causes and factors contributing to gender-based violence, including patriarchal attitudes, unequal power dynamics, harmful social norms, and discriminatory laws and practices, some of which we have just been discussing in the previous session. It recognizes the intersectional nature of gender-based violence, acknowledging that women may face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination based on factors such as race, ethnicity, age, disability, sexual orientation, and gender identity. So although it says discrimination against women, but it does include intersectional discrimination based on gender identity, and therefore includes other forms of genders, LGBTQI plus, and any other gender identity. It reaffirms the obligations of state parties under CEDAW to prevent, investigate, prosecute, and punish gender-based violence, and which includes obligation to adopt comprehensive legal frameworks and policies to address such violence. It underscores the importance of ensuring justice and effective remedies for survivors of gender-based violence, like legal aid, protection orders, compensation. It highlights the need for prevention strategies and education programs aimed at challenging stereotypes, promoting gender equality, and changing attitudes and behavior that perpetuate gender-based violence. It emphasizes the need for improved data collection and research on gender-based violence, including gender disaggregated data, prevalence studies, and monitoring progress of addressing such violence. And finally, it calls for international cooperation and assistance to support efforts to combat gender-based violence. So overall, General Resolution number 35 provides comprehensive guidance to state parties on addressing gender-based violence and reaffirms the commitment of international community to protect and promote the rights of women and girls. Now, CEDAW and India. India ratified the CEDAW Convention in 1983. Upon ratification, however, India expressed reservation to two articles, Article 5A and Article 16(1) of the Convention. Article 5A concerns modifying social and cultural patterns of conduct to eliminate prejudices and customary practices that are based on the idea of inferiority or superiority of either of the sexes. So India expressed reservation to this article, stating that it will abide by and ensure constitutional guarantees against discrimination provided to women, but that it could not be possible for India to take measures to modify social and cultural patterns in conduct. So this kind of reservation, with this kind of reservation, India is almost admitting that it doesn't have the way, will not or could not take responsibility for modifying social cultural patterns. Article 16(1) addresses the equality in marriage and family relations, particularly with regard to the responsibilities during marriage and its dissolution. So in this reservation also, India mentions that it is personal laws that governs marriage and family matters, and therefore the state cannot guarantee compliance with this article. So these reservations reflect India's stance on certain aspects of the convention, where it feels constrained due to its cultural, religious, and legal framework. So in effect, basically, it says that while it is it is constitutionally bound to provide honor the equality, fundamental rights of equality. In the event that that is contradicted by socio-cultural practices, they will not be able to guarantee those rights. So that is how India has ratified the convention. But since ratifying, India has introduced several policies and governance measures to end violence against gender-based violence towards implementation of CEDAW. And we can look at some of them right now. One is what is called, what are the legislative reforms. So several legislative reforms have been made to combat violence against women. An important one is the enactment of the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. And some of the key legislative aspects of this act is that it provides legal protection and support to women who are survivors of domestic violence. And it recognizes all forms of domestic violence, physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, and economic abuse, and defines the rights of victims and perpetrators. It also has a more comprehensive understanding of domestic violence because it's got a very broad definition which reflects the varied forms and manifestation of violence and ensures that victims are protected from abuse. This legislation also provides civil remedies to victims, including protection orders, residence orders, monetary relief, and custody orders for children. The emergency protection orders allows victim to seek immediate protection without having to wait for lengthy legal processes. The act also prohibits eviction of victims from their shared household. This helps victim to maintain their residence and access basic amenities while seeking legal recourse. Although this is primarily a civil remedy, there are also penal provisions for violation, for example, of the protection orders and other offenses of the act. So this legislation involves is a measure to strengthen the implementation enforcement of laws on domestic violence. The other big major legislative reform towards implementation of its commitment in the CEDAW is the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013. This act introduced changes into the sexual offenses and gender-based violence laws. And it includes expanded definition of sexual offenses to include offenses of sexual harassment, stalking, voyeurism, and acid attacks. So, and these expanded definition also further explains and defines, for example, stalking was as an act of following a woman and contacting her despite clear indication of disinterest, causing her fear or disinterest or distress. And similarly, acid attack is also defined. There are stricter penalties introduced for acts of sexual assault and gender-based violence. And one can debate the extent to which these stricter penalties act as deterrent, but the legislation provided for example, death penalty where the assault is of extreme depravity. The minimum punishment for gang rape is imprisonment for 20 years that could be extended to life. And acid attack has a minimum punishment of 10 years. So there are enhanced stricter penalties. There is enhanced protection to victims that includes protection of the identity of victims of sexual assault, and it is prohibited to disclose the identity of victim in any manner. Then there are fast-track courts that are provided to expedite trial of cases related to sexual offense within this act. There is also reform in the evidence law, which makes it easier for survivors to testify in the court. It allows for testimony of the survivor to be recorded by women police and provided for in-camera trials to protect the survivors. Then we have penalties for non-compliance and strict confidentiality, etc. I think I have, yeah. There is the next big legislation is the sexual harassment law, which I think was discussed in the previous session. So I will not mention that in any great detail, but that is also one of the major legislative reform that has been introduced. The next major aspects of measure towards implementing the CEDAW Convention is what was stated specialized court. A little bit greater detail on that. Specialized courts have been established at various levels of judiciary, including district courts, sessions court, high courts. They focus on specific types of cases, and the one in the context of gender-based violence, these cases handle crimes against women and other gender-related offense. And these courts are designed to provide more sensitive, efficient, and victim-centered approach to addressing these cases. Some of the basic features of these specialized courts are that they fast-track proceedings to ensure swift justice and to minimize delays of the judicial process. The personnel of the court, judges, prosecutors, and other court personnel receive training on issues related to gender-based violence that help them develop a deeper understanding of dynamics of such case and enable them to handle sensitive matters with empathy. Then it has victim support services, including access to counseling, legal aid, medical assistance, shelter facilities. And the specialized court prioritize privacy and security of the survivors by implementing measures like closed doors hearing, anonymity protection, and security arrangements within the court premises. So these measures help to create a safe environment for survivors to testify and seek justice. Then there is also provision of community outreach and awareness, and monitoring and evaluation mechanisms in place to evaluate the performance of their handling gender-based violence cases. However, despite all these provisions, the effectiveness of these specialized courts remains a question, and it depends on the adequate resources allocated to such courts, support from stakeholders, and ongoing efforts to address the systemic challenges within the legal system that could put obstacles for accessing justice on gender-based violence. The other aspects of not of the implementation of provision of CEDAW is awareness campaign, and there are several awareness campaign initiated by the state. These are state government NGOs plays a crucial role in addressing gender-based violence by reaching a wider audience, disseminating information about laws and support services, and promoting culture of respect and equality. So here are some of the examples of the awareness campaign. Awareness campaigns, that is Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and there is also the Women's Safety Campaign, Mahila Suraksha Abhiyan, which is Delhi-based. Then there is the Nirbhay Nari Shakti in Uttar Pradesh, Break the Silence campaign to help women speak out about domestic violence, the Break the Chain campaign in Maharashtra to address gender-based violence, and it has initiatives such as awareness programs, training workshop, advocacy efforts to challenge social norms. So here are some of the awareness campaign initiated by the state at the national and state level. But these campaigns are also run in collaborations with civil society, NGOs, human rights organizations, women's rights organizations. Several organizations are part of such campaigns as well. Then there are support services also, another measure to implement the CEDAW responsibilities under the CEDAW. Among the support services are helplines. Both there is a national commission's helpline for women that provides support and assistance for women facing gender-based violence, domestic violence, sexual harassing, trafficking. Then there is a women helpline operated by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, which provides similar services. It is not clear how effective, they're not always very effective, these helplines, but those are the measures that have been introduced. Then there are shelters and safe houses like the Sakhi One-Stop Center, which is also under the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare, providing temporary shelter, medical assistance, counseling, rehabilitation services to women. And then there are the women aid service shelters provided by, which operates shelter and safe houses. Similarly, there are several others. These houses are also, run in collaboration with certain NGOs and I think Vibhuti mentioned the Garima centers, or also similar centers under the measure of providing support services of shelter and safe houses. Then legal aid clinic, legal aid support center. There are several organizations from the civil society that provides legal aid. In Mumbai, we have the Majlis Center that provides legal assistance to women facing all forms of violence, and they assist with representation and assistance in filing complaints. There are similar legal aid centers around the major cities, definitely, maybe not so much even in rural parts of the country. Then there are legal aid and women's cells within like police stations and others places where and courts that have legal aid provisions for women facing gender-based violence. The other is counseling, psychosocial support. There are several telephone, email-based counseling, for example, operated by TIS in Mumbai. There is Sneha Crisis Intervention Support offering counseling. These counseling centers, try to address the mental health issues arising out of gender-based violence, and provide referral services to survivors of domestic violence. Similarly, there are several medical services provided by these one-stop centers that were established, also provide medical care, forensic examination, counseling, and legal aid. Then there are sexual assault traumatic centers that are part of various public hospitals across India, which offer specialized medical care support to survivors of sexual assault, including emergency treatment, forensic examination, counseling, etc. So that's another form of support services. Then you have the community support groups, and there are several groups and NGOs in each city that serve as community support groups for survivors. All the women's organization does this kind of work for providing community support to women who are survivors of gender-based violence. These groups provide peer support, information sharing, advocacy opportunity, and they also provide skills training and access to livelihood programs. So then you have the capacity capacity development is done. We have the capacity building programs, which is several aspects of capacity building programs. There is police training and gender sensitization workshop. These workshops are carried out as training for police personnel, where police officers to raise the awareness about gender-based violence, improve response protocol, enhance sensitivity in handling cases involving women and other marginalized communities. So Delhi Police, for example, regularly organize training workshop for its personnel on issues of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Some organization also have training on for police officers on investigative techniques and forensic procedures that is specific to gender-based violence and sexual assault. They equip the official with skills and knowledge on how to gather evidence and interview survivors. Then there are judicial training programs for judges and judicial officers to sensitize them on issues of gender-based violence, gender discrimination, women's rights. The National Judicial Academy in India conducts such training regularly, and these trainings are often on victim-centric approaches in handling cases of gender-based violence, emphasizing empathy, confidentiality, and survivor support. There are several organizations that collaborate and are involved in providing these training, that come from civil society, organizations like Majlis, Akshara, PLD in Delhi, and several others. They do provide such training and go to for participate judicial training program or police training personnel, training of police personnel. Then there is healthcare providing training also, where medical colleges and health institutions conduct training and workshop for doctors and healthcare providers on identifying responses to cases of gender-based violence. For example, the Indian Medical Association's Doctor for You offers courses on trauma-informed care, counseling, and services for gender-based violence. Some capacity building programs integrate training on reproductive health services with education on gender-based violence. The Ministry of Health and Welfare, Family Welfare, collaborates often with NGOs, for example, like Sehat in Mumbai, to provide training to healthcare providers on comprehensive care for survivor of gender-based violence. Then there is social worker and community leader training, which are also conducted by NGOs and grassroots organizations to build capacity of social workers, community leaders, volunteers in the field of gender-based violence prevention and response. These programs focus on building skills in counseling, advocacy, outreach, and community mobilization. There are several, almost all existing women's rights organizations are involved in, NGOs rather, are involved in capacity building exercises and training of trainers program, which use the train the trainer approach to cascade knowledge and skills down to frontline workers and organizations. Then we have the data collection and research aspect of the implementation towards implementation of India's obligations under the CEDAW Convention. There are several data collection methods. There is the National Family Health Survey, NFHS, that collects comprehensive data on various health and demographic indicators, including violence against women. And it provides insights into the prevalence and determinants of gender-based violence. Then there's a domestic violence module within this NFHS survey that was introduced in 2025 and 6, and again in NFHS 4 survey in 2015-16, which collects detailed information on women's experiences of physical, sexual, and emotional violence, as well as their access to support services. The data collected to this model provides insights, into the prevalence of domestic violence in India. Then you have the National Crime Records Bureau that collects and publishes crime statistics, which includes crimes against women, including rape, dowry deaths, domestic violence, sexual harassment, and helps identify trends and patterns of gender-based violence and informs policy on law enforcement responses. Of late, this data seems very unreliable. I have to myself try to access, and it is not update nor it is fully reliable. But for a long period of time, but this data is available. Then numerous studies, researches, and surveys are conducted by academic institution, non-government organization, international organization that contribute to the evidence-based response on gender-based violence. And then there are state level surveys and initiatives to gather data on gender-based violence. And at the state and district level. For instance, the Maharashtra State Commission on Women conducted a survey on violence against women in Maharashtra to provide insights into the prevalence and nature of violence. Then there are tech-based reporting platforms such as Safe City or Harris Up Map which utilize technology to collect data on incidents of harassment and violence against women. These platforms allow individuals to report incidents anonymously through mobile apps, online platforms, and contribute to better understand street harassment or unsafe public spaces. Then there are collaborative research partnerships of various between government agencies, academic institutions, NGOs, international organizations that play a crucial role in conducting research on gender-based violence. And these partnerships leverage expertise and resources to design and implement rigorous research study, evaluate information, disseminate findings to policymakers and practitioners. So these are the various ways in which the policy there is awareness on governance on the response to gender-based violence in India generally, but also specifically in implementation of its commitments under the CEDAW. Also, all these measures exist, and they are the problem still remains with regard to the effectiveness of how effective these measures are, and and the effectiveness of these measures are an issue. But so many measures do exist with regard to combating gender-based violence within the framework of the CEDAW Convention. And this has been achieved by various organization working in collaboration that includes women's rights organizations, civil society organization, NGOs, academic institutions, state agencies, international organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Your expertise and perspective have added tremendous value to our collective understanding of this crucial issue. Your thought-provoking insights were incredibly compelling. I would now like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel ji for her remarks on this session.
Thank you, Dr. Vahida Nainar, for giving such a comprehensive view and also making us realize how much labor goes into it in terms of research, documentation, mobilization, collection of evidences, and ground level support and handholding of the survivors of violence. My only one question is that when a survivor or a victim of sexual violence or any gender-based violence is from other country, how does CEDAW or the legislative mechanism suppose? For example, this Spanish blogger who was gang raped by 7 people just this week on 1st of March, how would it, the whole processes would take place for her justice?
Yeah, I have focused on policies and governance, of course, pertaining to here in India. But CEDAW as a convention is an international convention. It is implemented through its own mechanism when there is a committee on the CEDAW convention that meets regularly, and states are supposed to be filing. Conventions, as you know, are documents that state what are the obligations of the state party on the issue. So when the committee of CEDAW is formed, what the committee does is examines the extent to which each state party has met the obligations that they have said they will meet when they ratify the conventions. So this conversation is basically by the state and the convention. The way, so the state has, every 3 or 4 years, the state has to give a report to the CEDAW committee where they are, and they have to state what all they did with regard to for implementing their obligations under the CEDAW committee. And then there is a parallel process that is done by the civil society, particularly the women's organization and all, that produces a parallel report that either affirms or contradicts or shows how the measures that have been implemented by the state, the extent to which those have been effective. So those reports are also accepted by the committee, and based on all the information. So the idea is that the civil society and women's rights organization have an opportunity to send information to the committee on the implementation or the problems with regard to India's implementation on its commitments under the CEDAW. So that is how then, based on all the information that the committee gathers, when the state presents its reports, then the committee asks specific questions to the country and says that we have compelling information that on X issue or a Y issue, your response has been lacking, or it is ineffective, and basically that some of the figures are not or incorrect. And so the government has to answer to the committee and provide. This is the accountability mechanism with the committee of the CEDAW. Now, in terms of specific cases, certain regions have what is called courts of human rights. Or for example, Inter-American region, there's an Inter-American Court on Human Rights, and similarly, European Court of Human Rights. Right. Now, in these places, you can take or send individual cases of violations, where then they haul up. You have to send it with adequate documentation, and then it is taken up, and judgment orders are passed. There are several cases that have been passed on contribution of the CEDAW Convention, both by Inter-American Courts of Human Rights, which is operating for the Latin American, Central American region, as well as the European. So these are the only two regions where there is such regional mechanism. But in Asia, there is no such mechanism. So you can send this information about the rape of foreign women to the committee, or in fact to several mechanisms within the UN system. The CEDAW committee is one. You can send it to the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women. You can send it to the United Commissioner of Human Rights in Geneva. And when you use communication, the mechanism then writes to the state party and ask for response on what they are doing. That's the accountability mechanism within conventions and treaty, and that's how they are handled.
Can you throw light on International Criminal Court and its relationship with CEDAW?
International Criminal Court is a completely different mechanism. It does not. It has its own statute. It is not a human rights court. It is a criminal court which deals with or prosecutes crimes of a very high, which is considered the worst crimes in the world, in the legal system, in international law, which are called Jus Cogens norms, which means they are so severe that the international community has an obligation to prosecute and punish people wherever it happens and whoever. So this is the highest level of individual responsibility. It only holds of individual, not the states. So states cannot be taken into International Criminal Court. If you have a complaint against the state, you take them to the International Court of Justice, which is a different court. So International Criminal Court that way is not bound or does not implement CEDAW. It implements only its Rome Statute of International Criminal Court, within which there are gender-based crimes are recognized as severe crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. So if your situation falls as the most severe ones, then those can be taken. So CEDAW Convention, International Criminal Court does not implement CEDAW Convention.
Thank you. Anonymous attendee, please unmute and speak. And it was told that anonymous attendees are not allowed. You will have to give your identity. There are two questions. Ritvika, can you read?
Yes, sure, ma'am. So the first question is, where can one get trained to conduct trainings for the police, judiciary, healthcare provider? And the second question follows is, who conducts the monitoring and evaluation of the judiciary when they deal with cases of gender-based violence?
Yeah.
Good questions, yes.
Yeah.
In terms of training for police and healthcare providers, I know for certain that certain individual, in fact, some of the panelists within this panel also does training. If I understand right, Flavia has gone several times to conduct trainings, judicial trainings at the National Academy of Judges.
I've gone for police training.
You
Albertina.
yourself, you have gone. Albertina has gone. I know several persons within this panel who conducts, and takes sessions within these in these courses. And in terms of institutes, who does it? As I mentioned, National Academy of Judges for the judges. For police also, there are police trainings, but you can go through these NGOs that organize or participate, and you could do that. In terms of health services, as I mentioned, Sehat does such trainings, if I'm not mistaken, yes, which is an organization based in Mumbai on health services.
Also does. Sama in Delhi.
Sama in Delhi, yes. So there are several NGOs that does
Sama
this.
in Delhi. They are also doing.
I see someone writing, Seema, the Jagori used to do that.
Yes, Jagori.
And I know, several amongst the who does human rights law work or gender law work, who are lawyers in Supreme Court and High Court. They themselves are faculty for judicial training on issues of gender-based violence. So there are several faculties there. And then the second question was on
monitoring and evaluation.
Monitoring and evaluation of these processes. It is an internal process. It is done by the courts themselves. I would imagine they hire consultants, outside consultants, to perhaps to do it, or they do it with other academic institutions. But that's how the monitoring and evaluation mechanism works, to see the extent to which they have achieved. It is, it's not clear that there is a mechanism, there is within the system to do that. It is not clear to me. I mean, I haven't specifically read or accessed any monitoring and evaluation of these specialized code particularly.
But the women's groups also demand, no?
Yeah.
Accountability, like a Bilkis Bano case. So
Yes,
yesterday, Dr. Shalu Nigam gave several examples of Katwa case.
So there are several such, there is
state and non-state.
Yeah, there are monitoring of these mechanisms from the outside of the system also. That one knows is more effective in the sense, there's several academic papers written by women who've been working on sexual and gender-based violence for years, who then evaluate these courts and check and what kind of cases, the extent to which, what are the conviction rates, how these cases, go and meet with the survivors and talk about their experience in the judicial process. I understand Dr. Pratiksha Bakshi has written a very interesting book on experiences of survivors of sexual assault, in the judicial process. And there are several such academic, and non-academic reports made on the.
Dr. Shalu Nigam has done domestic violence.
Domestic violence, they have. So, and then there is on effectiveness of sexual harassment at workplace law also. There is one Nagap Sarpottar who has written a lot on that. So there are those kinds of
we have shared some of our articles in the dossier.
Dossier.
We have been shared.
So yes, so, and those are, I believe, more effective, data on the monitoring and evaluation of the system.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for being with us here today and patiently answering all our questions. The session has not only expanded our knowledge, but also inspired us to explore into further depths. We hope to have you in future IMPRI events. Following two
Thank
remarkable sessions by Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida ji and Dr. Vahida Nainar ji, we are now heading to our final session of the day, a legal hands-on session led by Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, visiting senior fellow at IMPRI and distinguished advocate, author, and researcher in gender and human rights. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And yeah, those are very remarkable sessions. So can I share the screen because it says this will stop other screen sharing. Yeah, so I'll talk about the concept of consent and how it has been evolved and deconstructed and constructed within the socio-legal discourse. So we all know that whenever any sexual act is committed against the will of the person, or if this person has not consented, then it could come under the purview of sexual violence. So, but consent has to be given by a person who is in position to consent. So, when a person is a child, or the person has some kind of mental disability, or the person she's in intoxicated state, or under the influence of alcohol or drugs, then that could not be considered as a consent. So similarly, sexual harassment law also talks about non-consensual physical contact, and even the rape law is now being defined as when the person is not in position to give the consent. So there is a lot of difference between how the legal consent is being described and the way social consent is being seen. So social consent, we have to there are different things like stigma, shame, victim blaming, and characters of the woman is being questioned, and not the man who is doing this act. That doesn't come into picture. So if you see one of the famous judgment in Muhammad Farooqi's case in 2017 Delhi High Court, in this case, the victim, the survivor, she was studying in the foreign institute, and she came to India to do a kind of PhD or some kind of research work, and she took this accused person as the guide, and then the incident took place, and the incident finally went to the court, and the court says that the woman's behavior is being analyzed, and it is being said that if it is a feeble no, it may means yes. The verdict says that if a woman is from a conservative background, then the consent could be deciphered differently. So but if the woman is intellectually or academically proficient, so for whom equality is a buzzword, then she has to be very clear in saying yes means yes and no means no. So it's like in the Bollywood movies, we take this concept of consent to hey Nina, like they say okay na ka matlab bhi haan hai. So in this formulation, the court took this view of consent. So the court says that this concept of formal equality, so they took into account that, and not the substantive equality. And the onus of communicating consent lies with the women. So this way, the concept of consent is being defined in this judgment. Already we have discussed yesterday the Mathura rape case. Again, it's a custodial rape case which took place on 26 March 1972, where Mathura, who was a young tribal girl, she was raped by two policemen in the compound of the Saiganj police station in Maharashtra. The session court in 74 found the defendants not guilty, and it says that Mathura was habituated to sexual intercourse, her consent was voluntary, and under the circumstances, only sexual intercourse could be proved and not rape. Uh, then on the appeal, the High Court said that it punished one of the constable to 1 year and to another to the 5-year imprisonment. And High Court said that passive submission due to fear induced by serious threat could not be construed as a consent or willing sexual intercourse. But when the case came to the Supreme Court, and in 1979, the Supreme Court acquitted both the accused people, and it says that Mathura has raised no alarm and there was no visible injury mark on her body, thereby suggesting no struggle, and then therefore there is no rape. And as Flavia ma'am told yesterday, that then the 4 professors, they wrote an open letter to the Supreme Court, and a lot of outrage took place. And then Criminal Law Amendment Act was introduced on 25th December 1983, and it made custodial rape punishable. Beside defining custodial rape, the amendment shifted the burden of proof from the victim to the accused, and it also added provision of in-camera trials. That means the trials should take place in an exclusive kind of a setting and not in open court setting. The prohibition on the victim identity disclosure and tougher sentences. But again, these amendments have not made much difference on the ground level. Because if you talk about the famous Rupendeyal Bajaj versus KPS Gill case, now in this case, both the parties were, from the high-profile kind of background. Ms. Rupendeyal Bajaj was an IS officer, and KPS Gill was a senior police officer, and the incident took place within a party. And on 20th August 1988, the High Court of Punjab and Haryana upheld Mr. Gill's conviction under Section 354 and Section 509. In 2005, the Supreme Court upheld the charges and conviction for Mr. Gill, and he was spared from undergoing the 3-month jail sentence. And but the Rupendeyal Bajaj, she declined to accept the monetary compensation, and so the case went for years, and finally Mr. Gill was rewarded with the Padma, and this is how Ms. Bajaj has to struggle for years to get justice. Again, I'll share here another struggle of Bhavri Devi. Now, Bhavri Devi, she was of Rajkumar. She lives in Bhateri village in Rajasthan, and where she lives in a village where most of the people belong to the Gurjar community. And she was married to Mohanlal Prajapat when she was around 5 or 6, and her husband was 8 or 9. In 1985, she became a Sathin under grassroots worker, and as a part of Women's Development Project in Rajasthan. And she was given this duty to campaign against child marriage. And this campaign was largely ignored by the villagers and faced disapproval from the local headmen also. So, but during the same time, the family of, one upper caste, high profile family in that village, they were conducting the marriage of their 9-month-old daughter. And Bhavri Devi went over there, and she just tried to stop that marriage. But no police action was taken, and Bhavri and her family faced social and economic boycott, and she was forced to leave her job while her husband was beaten up. And on 22nd September 1992, while her husband and she was working in the field, 5 men from the dominant and affluent caste, they attacked her husband with sticks, leaving him unconscious, and gang raped Bhavri. In her complaint, she named 5 people. at the police station, she has to undergo a lot of struggle to get her FIR registered. So she has to deposit her lehenga as an evidence. She has to cover herself with her husband's blood-stained safa, and walk to the nearest village at about 1 a.m. in the night. And then also her FIR, like, the medical report was not done because the primary health center, the male doctor there, he refused to examine her and refer her to the another hospital in Jaipur. And lab attendant at Jaipur, he refused to conduct the test without the order from magistrate, and magistrate refused to give the order until the next day, as it was past his working hours. So vaginal swab, which should be taken within 48 hours of the after the rape, was it's taken much after that, and her scratch and bruises were not recorded, and her complaints were ignored. The state authority as her employer, they have refused to help her, saying that they were not responsible since she was assaulted in her fields. And the court, the local court in Rajasthan, it gives its verdict on 15th November 1995. The district and session judge, he dismissed the case and acquitted all the 5 accused. They were not found guilty because the court said that Bhavari's husband could not have passively watched his wife being gang raped. Village head and elderly couple could not rape. The accused include an uncle-nephew pair. So a middle-aged man from a village could not have participated in the gang rape case in the presence of his own nephew. Upper caste men cannot rape lower caste women because of the reason of purity. And no, all the accused were acquitted, and this raised a lot of outrage, and therefore the state was forced to file the appeal. But since then, her appeal has been heard only twice. Meanwhile, 2 accused have died, and if you have read the reports, the recent report which came in last few months back, and it says that in the village now, the girl whose marriage she was trying to prevent, now she has grown up, and now she's accusing Bhavri that she's just trying to stop my marriage. So this is the way the justice is becoming elusive. And but meanwhile, a public interest litigation was filed in the Supreme Court, Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan, and the court, while hearing this petition, they pronounced some guidelines called Vishakha guidelines, and in the judgment in August 1997, in this guidelines, they said that what is sexual harassment at workplace and how to deal with it, and they talk about formulating internal complaint committee and the entire process of dealing with the sexual harassment cases. And I guess this guidelines, since there was nothing earlier, in the law book, so this guidelines took support from the international conventions, basically CEDAW and other laws, and it imposed 3 kinds of obligation on institutions: prohibition, prevention, and redressal. And then we know all about Nirbhaya protests, so I'll not go into that detail, but Take Off Azadi and other kind of slogans were raised. And after that, Justice Verma Committee was formulated, and Justice Verma Committee, in its very comprehensive report, produced within a month, and it gives a lot of recommendation about quicker trial, enhanced punishment, and sorry, it talks about medical examination of victim. So a very detailed report. And it says that the rape and sexual assault are not merely the crime of passion, but these are expression of power. It recognized marital rape as a crime, but yeah, in law, we are still struggling for it. The committee rejected the proposal for chemical castration, and it opined that death penalty should not be awarded for these offense of rape, because it is not deterrent enough. And the committee recommended that life imprisonment for serious rape could be there. It also recommended discontinuation of 2-finger test, And it suggested for rape crisis cell to provide assistance to the victims. The committee said that police are duty bound to register the complaint, and if they fail to perform their duty, they must be held liable for the punishment. The committee also recommended conducting literacy programs for children to impart sex education to them. And it also says that the Representation of People Acts, 1951, that should be amended, and the candidates should be disqualified if one is facing criminal charges for sexual offense. So this report is available on the net. You can just download and read it. So after that, amendments were made in the criminal law in 2013, and acid attack was recognized as a crime. And new sections, section 326A and 326B were added, which make acid attack punishable to the, with minimum 10 years of imprisonment, which could be there up to life imprisonment. And there was another case which came up before the Supreme Court, Lakshmi versus Union of India, in which 16-year-old girl was attacked with acid. And after this incident, the court suggested the need for strong provisions to counter the offense. Sexual harassment, we have a separate law for that, POSH Act, as you may know it. But even under Indian Penal Code, Section 354A was added, which says that sexual harassment should be treated as a criminal offense. And for this offense, a man can be punished with imprisonment up to 3 years. And if the person is making sexually colored remarks, that the person could be imprisoned up to 1 year. So, and it says that employers are obligated to report this offense. Then assaulting or threatening a woman using criminal force to disrobe her is also being recognized as a crime, and punishment is minimum 3 to 7 years. And if the person is taking pleasure from watching the woman as naked or being engaged in sexual activity, that person could be punished with a minimum of 1 year of imprisonment. So Delhi High Court, it says that if somebody is peeping inside the washroom, that could also be seen as a crime under this law. And stalking is when a person is following a woman, or monitoring her using the internet, or monitoring her email or electronic communication. Now this kind of act could be penalized, and the person could go for imprisonment up to 3 years, up to more than 5 years. So stalking is now is becoming a crime. And the rape laws are being amended. So now, earlier it says only, penetrative sex should be there, could only be covered under the law. But now, non-penetrative acts like oral sex or inserting any object on any part of the body of women, it's being treated as rape. So, the punishment, the severity of punishment has been increased. So it could be 10 years, or it could be life imprisonment, or it could be the person could be rewarded a death penalty. In enhanced, enhanced punishment could be given in certain situations, like if the person is being reduced to a vegetative state. Now, many of you may remember this case of Aruna Schonberg. Now, she was working as a nurse in a hospital where she was raped by a attendant in this hospital, and she was reduced to a vegetative state, and she has been living in the state for several years. And finally, she approached the Supreme Court, for mercy death, but then the Supreme Court refused that. But finally, in this kind of cases, the court says that the minimum punishment should be 20 years. It could be life or death sentence also, in case the person is facing this kind of situation. So if the person is in authority, it may be the person who is public servant, who is in charge of jail, or the person who's in charge of institution for women and children, or in charge of hospital. Even in that situation, the rape will be treated as a heinous crime, and the punishment could be minimum 5 to 10 years. In terms of gang rape, the punishment could be 20 years to life imprisonment, and for repeated offenders, it could be life or death sentence. In 2018, again, the law was made more strict, and the person is being found guilty of raping a 12-year-old child, then the punishment is extended up to 20 years of imprisonment or death sentence. And gang rape of a girl under age of 16 could invite life imprisonment and a fine. And so these kind of the laws are being made strong and strong. And death penalty, of course, women's organizations are against death penalty, but the laws have been amended as such. So for the authorities, there are certain provisions which are being made, like the public servants or hospital authorities, if they fail to discharge their duties, they could be made liable, and they could be fined or imprisoned, depending on the type of offense. The hospital management staff is being specifically told to provide proper treatment free of cost, including the first aid to the victim. And if they don't do so, they could be punished with imprisonment. So it is irrelevant whether this hospital is a public hospital or the private hospital. In terms of relief measures for the victims of sexual offense, the law says that the recording of the statement of the victim should be done in the presence of female police officer. And if the victim is mentally or physically disabled, then the recording of statement should be done at her residence or any convenient place, and in the presence of interpreter or special educator. And this recording should be videotaped. And also another provision is added that the provision of taking assistance from an interpreter or special educator, and videography is being made mandatory. And the section 273, it says that the court will take measures so that women under the age of 16 and one who is a victim of rape or sexual offense should not be confronted by the accused while conducting this cross-examination within the courtroom. And so these kind of relief measures are added, and it says that during the trial, the character or the of the victim or her previous sexual experience is irrelevant. If the woman says that she's being she has been assaulted, so then the court it will take the consent to the sexual intercourse as not being given. So it is presumed that there is an absence of consent. And it also says that no question shall be asked to the victim during the cross-examination which are of immoral in nature and which are related to her previous sexual experiences. And the witnesses who are unable to communicate verbally can give their statement in other ways, such as writing or through signs, and it shall be deemed as an oral evidence. And such witnesses should be provided the assistance of interpreter or special educator, and such statements shall be videotaped. So what are the rights of survivors? Now, basically, one of the major problem which came across is that mostly the FIRs are not being filed. So now the provision is that there is a right to file 0 FIR. So if no police station is filing the FIR, they are saying that, okay, this is not under my jurisdiction, go to another one. So in that case, a victim can file 0 FIR, and same FIR shall be transferred to the police station having jurisdiction for the investigation to begin. There is also provision for compensation to the victim. Section 357A of Criminal Procedure Code. It talks about victim compensation scheme, and Punjab and Haryana High Court, in one of its decision, it says that a minor rape victim cannot be denied compensation even if it is not being brought up at the end of the trial. So also Nirbhaya funds, we know these have been created, but yeah, of course, its implementation is a huge problem. But then victims do have right to compensation, and they can demand for compensation, like, in that kind of situation. So the law has also been amended to ensure that trial is conducted with full dignity, and it should be speedy trial and with protecting the rights of the victim. So it says that the trial court should be held in the court which is presided by a woman judge, and no questions can be asked to the victim to assassinate her character. And the Supreme Court, in one of the case, it has given a detailed guidelines that if a witness doesn't want to reveal his or her name, the identity should remain protected. So these are the kind of rules which are being laid to protect the rights of survivors. But what we are seeing actually being implemented in the court is something which is very different. For example, in March 2021, the Madhya Pradesh High Court, it gives a judgment that, if a woman can tie a rakhi to the accused, and the accused can get the bail in that kind of situation. So, to counter that, a petition was filed by 9 women lawyers, and then the Supreme Court, it says that it gives a detailed judgment, and it issued a guideline, and it says that these kind of stereotypes must be avoided, and it is gross trivialization of trauma which is being suffered by the complainant. So the Supreme Court now says that in this judgment that the bail condition should not mandate the contact between the accused and the victim. And in all cases where bail is granted, the complainant should immediately be informed and the copy of bail order be given to her within 2 days. Also, the bail conditions and orders should avoid reflecting stereotypical or patriarchal notions about women and their place in society. And it says that, certain words, like the morality of the prosecutrix shouldn't be used within the judgment, and there should be no efforts should be made towards compromise between the between the victim and the accused, in terms of because many of the courts are coming with the idea, okay, that if they both are getting married, then the accused could be released. So these kind of things are now being disallowed. So again, the culture of impunity, we have discussed this yesterday, so I'll not go into detail of this, but we have to work on that, because the laws are very good on paper, but when it comes to implementation, we see a lot of problems. So the Ministry of Women and Child Development, now they said that they have started a scheme towards the scheme called Nishtha, where a teacher training program is conducted to include the gender dimension, and it says that the scheme will provide self-defense training to the girls from class 6 to 8. Now, again, the scheme is being criticized because self-defense, meaning that you are putting onus of the prevention of crime on women and girls. So instead of stopping the accused person, you are again putting a burden on small children. So emphasis should be given on bystander interventions and community-oriented programs that could engage men and boys, parents and teachers. And we have to take steps to prevent gender-based violence. And so I don't know, we can have different views on whether we should have self-defense training for for such young girls or not, but again, this is debatable issue. So with this, I will just end my slide here, and we can have question and answers. Thank you so much.
Sincerely thank you, ma'am, for an illuminating session. providing practical insights that will undoubtedly enhance our approach to the subject matter. I would now like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel ji for her remarks on this session.
Yeah, I think a very comprehensive session and so many case laws Dr. Shalu Nigam discussed. And I think only one correction that in Aruna Shanbag case, she was in a vegetative state, abandoned by her own family because they could not afford to look after her. She was from a low middle class family. Her fiance also left her. And it was the women doctors and the nurses of her department who were looking after her. And when Pinky Virani went to do a feature on her life, Aruna Shanbag's life, and she saw Aruna's condition, it was this journalist who filed public interest litigation for euthanasia of Aruna Shanbag, which was vehemently opposed by the Dr. Parker, who was leading the whole team which looked after Aruna Shanbag, and the nurses union also opposed it. So that's this thing. But I think what is most important about your presentation is that the continuous sensitization of the criminal justice system is very, very important. And this whole journey, right from Mathura, where we demanded the change in the adequated rape law and focus shifted from penile penetration to circumstantial evidences. And at the time of Nirbhaya, I think the Charter Manifesto of Women's Freedom, which Justice Verma and Dr. Seth came out about, I think that has increased the scope for the survivor to fight the cases because now we have all those systems in place, how to conduct medical examination, what kind of responses police, if they don't respond on time, then they can be punished, they can be suspended, because that's what is the new directive. And also, but still what we see in reality is the worst form of judgments have come up in last 5 to 10 years. Even in police academy, gender sensitization on sexual violence and all, which was happening so rigorously, judiciously during 80s and 90s, that has stopped. So if we leave everything to the institutions and the existing structures, they are also informed by the patriarchal biases. So pressure from the women's movement, when it is not there, then I think whatever we have earned in the past, that also gets wiped out. This is what the learning of this thing. So that's why more and more like women's groups and civil society organization, they have to continuously, in fact, every time we had demonstration or a rally or a petition that we gave to the police officer during 80s, they would always tell us whenever they called us for discussion, because and they say, you continue your pressure, because we work under tremendous pressure. So you also continue your pressure, so that there is a media publicity and there is this thing, and the vested interests, they are also brought to book. So I think pressure from below is very, very important in all these cases. And that's so I think the major testimony which you discussed about Bilkis Bano case, the commitment with which some lawyers and the social organizations stood by her own courage also, that even after such a traumatic and devastating experience, she did not back out. So many women backed out because we had in Gujarat, right? But she did not. So I think hand-holding, solidarity, and building up the pressure from below, they are the learnings from whatever, all the case studies that you have presented before us. Very, very, very illuminating presentation.
Yes, so I think, yeah, definitely we have to continuously engage with, with the police, with judiciary. We have to, I think, continuously, monitor the kind of judgments which are coming, and then put pressure on the courts also, because the courts will say, we generally say that they are independent institutions, but then we have to, because again patriarchal biases are there, that they are part of the system, they are not standing alone kind of a thing. So to continuously monitor at every level, from police investigation to the till the victim gets the justice.
So the evidences are not destroyed, as it happened in case of public. I think Professor Nati Lopez, who has been working in this area for a very, very long time, would you like to say, you have written something in the chat box, no? So is College of Social Work involved in training? Hello, please.
Yes, and we are like in Palghar district. we mainly, and Thane, there is a kind of a little bit cooperation, but in Palghar we used to find very difficult in a sense that to conduct trainings. Only once in August they gave us permission for those who were newly appointed police, like no, their recruitment happens. For that, Mira Bhainder, police commissioner, allowed us to conduct some training programs, because it is very essential every time wherever police stations are. We conduct the training, and after 6 months, like no, because of the cases, which kind of cases they go, and then women will call us saying, "Didi, wo log nahi lete hai." Like no, when they go to the, now of course we send them to the protection officer, but otherwise these people are, means police, they are not old, what to say, higher authority people. They go for training and they get some kind of information, so they have. But these people who are at the means in the police stations and all, they behave very differently, and
That was the
many.
long-standing demand that we should also, not in police academy in Hyderabad, it should be at a PSI and constable level training in regional language, which is very important, because they are the ones who write FIR, they are the ones who conduct Panchnama, and the medical examination also is facilitated. They keep in touch with, and they immediately, like, they ring up the public hospital or civil hospital for the medical examination. And if they coach this casualty ward doctors what to write, then the case is completely ruined. No,
Yes,
that's
yes.
what.
And another thing, like no, now because of this DV Act, like protection officers send the, because many of our women who come, they are coming from a low economic background, so they have to go for free legal aid, and there, then again, those lawyers are not women sensitive. Like no, they actually they don't know much about this. Like no, uh, they will talk something, and then they will take them away, and they will say, "इतना पैसा दे दो, हम आपको केस आपको फ्री कर देंगे." Like no, and that woman, but like no, there we face as a hand holding of NGOs, we come in there, and then we have to follow it up with that. So what I last time in August, from there we were following with this quote, that even for legal aid lawyers, we will, means lawyers, because they are not sensitive, means they know the law, but they are not with the, like, gender sensitivity is not there. Like no, they don't understand those nitty gritty. Like woman who had just bad, like no, she's come out with nothing, how you can ask her for proof and all these kind of things, or like no money or other things, like no. So we want to give this kind of permission. It is taking so much time, and like no, you have some other things, when you are not followed up, then they are still like no, sitting on it. So, and these last 2 3 years we find this kind of attitude has come much more, because government, like no, the socio political situation is such that this kind of thing we find it very difficult.
They don't want the word divorce. No, even so many bureaucrats, they also say don't use this term word divorce. No? So
uh,
yeah, that's.
Yeah, India, but I must say Dr. Shalu has covered so such a, means, large quantity. Means we know these things, but she has put in a perspective. So thank you, Doctor. Yeah.
Two hands are raised. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll take it first. I mean, of course, this presentation opens up a lot of questions. I've got one question, like last month or so, no, maybe a couple of months back, 2 3 months back, there was a person who used to ejaculate on the road, seeing upon some of our students going to hospital. So these girls went to the police station, and when they went to the police station, the police said, "Bring evidence." So these girls were like also quite bold. So they did shoot and take a small video recording, and then they went there. And then one evening, I get a panic call. It was raining very heavily outside, and the call was that these girls went to the police station late night, and they gave this evidence, and they had to give an application where two girls signed, the application. And they had not yet returned back to the hostel. They'd already received Instagram follow requests by the police, to whom they had given the report. The girls couldn't sleep whole night, and next day, we took it up from the university, and they were not ready to go to the police station at all. So, at the ground level, it's very difficult. And they were the fourth semester students. They were passing out. They were not going to be here. And they decided to change their SIM cards once they return and things of the sort. So that's the kind of fear, So there are young girls who really want to do something, and they wanted to basically report so that, the other girls in the hostel, because they would have gone, other girls in the hostel don't suffer. So there's a lot of problem at this level. And, I mean, my immediate reaction to them was that, why couldn't you go to women police thana? Right. And they were not aware of anything like women police thana, ki mahila police thana karke bhi kuch hota hai. So I really don't know that when we come to the ground, level, then we start facing complications right from step one. And we really don't know how to go about it. And until the time these girls were here,
A similar thing used to happen in a Malad. There are around over half a dozen colleges, and there were a group of boys who used to be very, very aggressively molesting girls on the platform, because it's a peak hours, no? Trains are crowded, and they would target women's compartment. And they went and told their story in the class. And group of boys, they came forward. They said, okay, one thing we'll do, that we will be there at the platform, and we'll take pictures of these boys and put it up on the platform, that beware of these boys. They are the sex-based. They are the ones who are harassing women. It was naming and shaming, and all the commuters were seeing it. No? So that really worked. Because so I think sensitizing man, once again, I think that becomes very important. And I think with we are going to have a speaker in the program, MAVA, Men Against Violence and Abuse, how they are changing the mindset of these young men and making them responsibility. Is not only a women's question, it is a question of, it's a responsibility of everybody. So men also have to come forward to fight against gender-based violence. So I think solidarity is very important. In our case, it worked. There was a man who was flashing at the gate of SNDT, and the girls stopped coming to the class. And we did not understand. MA history students, they had an assignment to write history of each and every statue. So they had to travel in the South Bombay. So they had to really walk in a group. And this man was in a safari, looking very posh, was flashing. And girls got so tired, they changed the route. And then too, he was followed. Then finally, teacher rang up that, why aren't you coming to the class? No, they said, no, we can't tell anybody in the home. If we do that, they'll stop our education. And one girl blurted out that this is what is happening. So teachers said that you all had smartphone in your hand. Why didn't you pretend to click? They said, but they said, pretend, don't take actual picture of flashing, but at least pretend. Suddenly 6-7 girls showing their smartphone, no, and pretending to be, that really worked. It worked as a deterrent. That man never showed up again. So, but it was a group reaction, no, not only 1 or 2 girls, but there were 8-10 girls who came together. But they did not know even this, that they could have used it, no. That idea they did not have, because such a sheltered atmosphere from where they come.
My second concern is about, this concern about self-defense classes for girls. So I want to share this because when my daughter was very small, 6-7 years, we used to send her for karate.
Yeah, same I did.
And she wouldn't go. So she was not at all, inclined towards it. And for 1 year, I mean, every Wednesday there was a class and she would get stomachache and she would find some reason not to go for the class. Later on, I realized that she was very soft at heart. In anything which was concerning beating others or, she being beaten by anybody wouldn't register to her. And she didn't learn anything from those classes. And eventually we didn't force her and we stopped her from going there. So, it's like making these classes mandatory is also not the solution. So we are not targeting, the perpetrators, or we are not sensitizing boys, to understand, all these social concerns, right? And we're giving them a lot of confidence, by only catering to girls or teaching sex education to girls, or conducting isolated workshops on menstruation with girls and not bringing the boys in. So this is very, very problematic.
But see, in Palghar, what Nati is talking about, in that there are only 5 women police officers, and they say that we can't protect. There are 8 to 10 colleges in Vasai district, and all these girls come from tribal area, and they are always targeted. We have certain stereotype about sexual freedom of tribal communities, no? So they are targeted, and now with the migration, like there is a complete non-accountability. That cohesiveness has gone in those villages and all. And the women, it was women police officers say that these girls have to be assertive and look after themselves. No, we will be there, but imagine we get complaints 6 or 7 places. We get complaint. How can we reach out? We are only 5. And though Maharashtra government made 25% reservation for women in police recruitment, but women are not coming forward. It's hardly 17%. And that too, training is done by our university. We have a Swayam Siddha training program in SNDT, with the sports department does it. So I think a lot of constraints are there even in the system. When opportunity is there also, women, not many women. Plus, it's also very, very much linked to body mass index. On an average, if Indian girls are given least food and most malnourished they are, how are they going to join the police? For the minimum criteria for joining police also, you need to have certain kind of weight and health and hemoglobin level and body mass index. No? So there are multiple challenges.
Thank you.
I think we need to get more creative in terms of, okay, legal strategies are one part of it, but maybe, more kind of social things and, a lot of solidarity among a lot of women's group have to be, a lot of women's organizations who are more actively working at the ground level. So I think then maybe, some kind
When
of...
I was in Bombay University, I would invite only Harish to speak on women's question and gender-based violence, because then you are targeting the boys, because boys would listen to him. Otherwise, they would say, oh, WDC, it's a women's job, like this. And so many stereotypes, man is a hunter and woman is a prey, and bringing all social Darwinism. And but once Harish spoke, then they would listen to. So when I was in Bombay University that time, I think his experiences, and he also motivated so many young boys to join MAVA. So now MAVA is a big movement now. Anushiji, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. First question is, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. First of all, thank you very much, Shalu Nigam, ma'am, for such a detailed presentation, and thank you very much, Vibhuti Patel, ma'am, for making such noteworthy comments. So, my question is on a basic level, and being a student of literature, I am a novice when it comes to legal structures and legal policies. However, we are constantly speaking of justice, but I'm quite cynical, like when it comes to the role of justice in punishment of rapists and abusers. For instance, if I consider 2 different cases, like in 2019 Hyderabad rape case and the Nirbhaya rape case in 2012. In the first case, the culprits were shot dead and it was called an encounter, while in the Nirbhaya rape case, the rapists were hanged. They received capital punishment, and that too after a long wait in 2020. And also, for that matter, if I consider life punishment, so do you think that these can serve as effective means of serving justice? I mean, can these various laws weigh equally against acts of rape, acid attacks, and any kind of violence? Also, my another observation is there is this common saying that charity begins at home. Likewise, I am of the belief that justice also begins at home. From a very young age, us girls, boys as well, every child, I mean, we are not really taught the concept of good touch and bad touch. So, and most of us refrain from telling our parents, our elders, what's happening with us. The fact that we are getting molested by someone close.
We also grew up listening to all the horror stories about incest and some of the uncles and mamas
Exactly, ma'am.
behaving with
Exactly,
us,
ma'am.
and our mothers telling us to hush up. No, that is also the reality.
Exactly, ma'am. So my question is, when we can't even find justice in our own safe space, in our own home, how can we expect that an external body, a legal system, can effectively serve us justice?
Yeah,
That's
so,
all.
yeah. Ma'am, would you like to respond?
It is the atomization of women, dividing women and making them suffer in silence. I think that is the major deterrent. That because once you suffer in silence, you will always find fault with yourself. There must be something wrong with me, the way I speak, the way I dress, the way my body language is. So that, and the sense of shame also, that why it doesn't happen to someone else, because you don't know whether it happens to others or not. When we had in 1988, we had a national conference on rape. All the parties, we had more than 400 participants, and every week we had created small groups of 20, 25 women, and in circles they would sit and discuss. And first time in their life, all of them said that yes, they had some form of such uncomfortable experiences from doctor, from liftman, from uncle, from papa's colleague, or from in the school, or by watchman, or by school bus conductor, or this. They said they had never spoken about it. It was just buried in that. Because it is only in that conference that they open, and many of them are the stalwarts in the women's movement, okay, and they had not spoken. So I think this whole culture of silence, conspiracy of silence regarding sexual violence, that has to go. Then only we will be able to address it, because once you locate the problem, that burden is not on you, the burden is on the accused who has perpetrated violence, then you get energy to fight against it, no? So most important thing is that we need to speak about it. So we need even democratization of family, so that child feels safe to tell. Why your and my daughter comes and tells everything, what happened in the school, or what happened in school bus, or what happened on the road, and this thing, and then we address the issue. But the talking in a hush tone, not talking about the sexual violence, not treating it as a social problem rather than as an individual problem, and using the ideology of victim blaming. Why did she go to pub at night? That Hyderabad case in 2019. Who asked her to go to pub in the evening? Same in Guwahati case, same in the Pink Chaddi movement, no, in Mangalore, when they were attacked by these Ramasena people. So I think the questioning has to come up, and the collective solutions have to be created, that we need to have more serious discussions in all the public platforms, no? That then only and plus it has to be treated as a hazard, not as a something which has become, you have become defiled, no? Because that also feeling that women generally have, no? That but it is a very, very devastating hazard. It is a very damaging hazard that happens, and mobility is the major, and the myth that when you go out, you face harassment. But even in the house, the incest and the sexual advances, you go to any public hospital or in the abortion ward, all these young girls, no, below 18 girls, who how did they become pregnant? Most of the time they are from the people whom they have known. In fact, all the studies have also shown majority of cases of sexual violence, women have known the perpetrator. That means that's why they have trusted, no? It is stranger rapes happen only during the major riots and conflicts, but there too the community knows each other, no, and they take revenge or some. But so I think that the rape culture has to be questioned at every level. Then only.
I just want to add one line, because the concept of justice is different for everyone. So, like, when I was interviewing women in the courts, or the cases which are coming to the courts, again the concept of justice differ from person to person. If your definition of justice may be very different from my definition of justice, so again we have to take into consideration the individual subjectivities. And of course, the mob injustice, as you said, in Hyderabad, case is something which is very wrong. As a societal level, when we have courts, how can the policemen or anybody else can can become the courts. Similarly, we're talking about the bulldozer justice. When the constitutional courts are there, how can police be given so much of power to, or
Or even that Akku Yadav case,
yeah,
Nagpur.
the Akku Yadav case.
Where women, they got fed up. Police did not do anything. He had a political mileage, politically powerful. And the women of the community only got together and killed him. And then when they asked, they could not find evidence, because all the women, they said, who murdered Akku Yadav? So 400, 500 women, they just stood up and they just said, we murdered. And they could not locate the murderer. No.
And that happened inside the courtroom, in the front of, everyone's court staff is there, the judge is there, and it happened inside the courtroom.
Correct.
So,
they were just fed up
evidence.
completely, because that man was so cruel. He did not leave any woman. He was extremely barbaric, even in sexual violence, the kind of act he did. Women just got fed up, do or die. No, that was the kind of mood they had, a Koyata phenomena.
Yeah.
It became a phenomenon because it gave a message in the city of Nagpur, which was known for extremely cruel form of even ragging and sexual violence. After that, you see the women have become more confident to speak about it. They don't, they
And even the Manorama's case, if you remember now,
yeah,
how the mothers, they came out naked and say that, okay, like, we are.
similarly, they did even in Kerala, no?
Yeah.
4-5 years back on 8th March.
Yeah. So,
Chile also, we have seen in Chile, women against the army. And that song also, that very popular song, which is translated in several languages in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So it all depends. And individual cases, I can tell there was one woman and she was widowed and she was being suppressed by the family. The brother of her husband, the late husband, he said that, okay, you marry me because of the property reasons. But then and she was raped by this brother, and but she came to the court. She said कि अब इसने मेरी daughter को rape किया है. My daughter is growing up. She's 16, 17 years old, and now he's raping me. No, I'm not going to leave him. So that was the kind of mindset she has when she met me. So these kind of how the kind of experiences women face, the subjectivities, so all kind of things affect the decision of a person, or the idea of justice at that particular point of time.
So. My class is still going on. 10 more minutes. Huh? Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Very, very interesting discussion. Yes. Ramifications. Yeah.
Ma'am, I think Seema Malhotra ji has also raised her hand.
Yeah, she spoke, no? Seema ji, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just 2 more minutes. Yesterday we talked about 1975. In 1980, I saw the first case of child rape as a trainee social worker in 82. And I was not sensitive enough, it was pata bhi nahi tha what is rape ka. Though, one knew, but one really didn't know. So I may be risking an ire of women and feminists, but mujhe puchna hai ki, are there any services, counseling services available to the boys or men who know that they have such tendencies? Because I'm not a regular counselor, but I get so many cases to me through people and I refer them to others. This boy knew that, he has such tendencies, but he was managing them with animals. I was totally at loss how to guide him. His uncle had brought him. So क्या हम लोग के पास कोई नल का चल रहा और पानी बह रहा, हम लोग पोछा लगा रहे. मुझे लग रहा है नल का कैसे बंद करें. बेटी पढ़ाओ, बेटी बचाओ, बेटे को समझाओ, बेटी को बचाओ. Somewhere, I don't know. Don't want to be very negative, but कुछ तो आंसर होना चाहिए कहीं पे. और
और ये भी वो जो प्रिजन स्टडीज जो हैं, सोशल वर्कर्स ने, साइकियाट्रिस्ट ने और साइकोलॉजिस्ट ने किए हैं, वो सब भी इंटरव्यूज ऑफ और इन डेप्थ केस स्टडीज ऑफ हार्डन्ड rapists, who have done all sorts of heinous activities and all, and they, while discussing with the researcher, they say that आप मेरी जिंदगी में बहुत देर से आए. I wish you were there when I was 5-year-old and I used to every night listen to hearing the screams of my mother when my father was raping her. I grew up with all the galis which were targeted to women's genitals, or I saw life only as a zero-sum game. Either you overpower someone or someone will overpower you. There was no question of dialogue. The way आप दीदी हमारे साथ बोल रही है, उस वक्त किसी ने हमें नहीं बताया. So I think the whole the atmosphere in which a child grows up, that is also very important. So I think we will have to start from the preschool days, early childhood education. From that days only, how to negotiate human relations with others. So that is like in France, they said a boy would lift girl's skirt, and the teacher laughed, and the mother and the feminists, they said nothing. You can't do that. Today he's lifting her skirt. Tomorrow he will go and tear her blouse. Day after tomorrow he will go and forcibly kiss her. And after that he will go, because he sees this as a sign of empowerment. So nobody should giggle when a child lifts, a 3-year-old child lifting a skirt of his classmate. It is not a matter of joke. So from that only we have to say, this is not funny. This kind of humor is not, it is not humor. It is insult. It is a violation of dignity and bodily integrity of a fellow human being. So I think that also we will have to, things which we consider it as very, all those stupid, the WhatsApp messages which are sent, misogynist messages, throughout the lockdown they were sending it. And imagine, can we connect that with a 10 times more increase in gender-based violence during the lockdown, globally as well as in our country? So I think we will have to take it up at that level. We can never take it as a joke or just ignore this kind of remarks, as I showed in yesterday's pyramid, that it starts with this kind of behavior, neglect and indifference towards insult, and then gender stereotypes are solidified, then the inequality and discrimination, aggression, rape, and murder. We have to take collective responsibility.
So since there are no more questions, I would want to thank Dr. Shalu Nigam ji for being with us here today and patiently answering all our questions and explaining complex concepts. We look forward to the privilege of having you as our guest again down the road. As we are through with all of our sessions for the day, I request our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to kindly share final remarks on today's deliberation.
Yeah, I'm extremely moved by all three presentations, very well documented and analytically robust presentations by Advocate Dr. Albertina, Dr. Vahida Nainar, and Dr. Shalu Nigam. All of them have a very strong background, both in the legal activism as well as the social science routing also. That has made their presentations extremely powerful. The only one aspect which I would like to connect here is that the conflicting interest in cases of gender violence generated due to identity politics, and which have forced women's rights activists to the question of traditional forms and methods of campaigning. Because when you are dealing with the individual cases and networking with various structures to get either justice or rehabilitation or rebuilding the life, it's a different ballgame. But the certain militant slogans which are used by the women's groups in past, they have also been used by the jingoist forces to escalate violence against women of minority groups. We have seen in n number of caste riots, communal riots, where women are instigating their men to perpetrate sexual violence against women from minority. I have been in the investigation committee of several riots, caste-based conflict or communal conflict or ethnic conflict, where we have seen how women become the agents, how women are weaponized to perpetrate violence against the minority groups, whether they are ethnic minority, caste-based minority, religious minority, or sexual minority. Another thing, that imagery of fire or Kali or Durga as a destroyer of evil, or the Shakti cult that has been used to generate propaganda against minorities, Muslims. In this context, there is a lot of rethinking that is going on about the appropriate slogans, symbols, and images, and the language that we use in both our interpersonal discourse and also in our public life. Another very important issue, which is juxtaposing of women's plight in terms of our women and their women, because there also, like you could see, what happened in case of Bhavri Devi, it was this Jat community. They had one standard for our women and another standard for women from other castes, because Bhavri Devi happened to be from a Potter caste. Women's rights organizations have always opposed criminalization of politics that provokes men and women from opposite camps into using women's bodies to settle account with each other. In the recent past, we have seen that several incidents where women from majority community have actively participated in escalating violence against women from minority community. And I think we need to also confront that. Fundamentalists and chauvinistic forces all over the world have been supported by an equal number of women as they are supported by men. We saw day before yesterday a big demonstration by women and young girls in support of Asharam Bapu. Okay, and the same Asharam Bapu had said, if women have a character of Sita and Savitri, she would not be raped. It was his response to Jyoti Singh's Nirbhaya gang rape, no? Where a young physiotherapist was raped in a moving bus at 9:30 p.m. These experiences have put the feminist discourse on a totally different plane, where the concept of universal sisterhood needs to be re-examined. I think several examples were also cited by all the three lawyers and today's resource person. Yesterday, when Flavia mentioned that. So in the final analysis, we come to a perspective that gender violence is a violation of human rights and it needs to be combated both by men and women. That is a very important learning of last 2 days sessions. And it's a responsibility of all citizens, men, women, gender minorities, to address gender, to look gender-based violence straight in the face, because that was the slogan in 1980. Isn't it time to look rape in the face? That was the title of our leaflet, that we need to combat it. We can't take it lightly, or we can't, any form of trivialization has to be challenged. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for the beautiful summarization of today's takeaways. With your permission, ma'am, we can go ahead with the final vote of thanks.
Yes. Please go ahead.
As we come to the end of day 2 of Ending Gender-Based Violence, Cohort 2, Awareness of Policies and Governance, an online national spring school program, a 4-week online immersive certificate training course, I, Ritvika Malik, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center. We are grateful to our experts for the day 2, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida ji, Dr. Vahida Nainar ji, and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji for taking out their valuable time and allowing the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We extend our sincere appreciation to our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, for skillfully presiding over today's program. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. Readings for the session have been shared in your email, and a video of the session will be also shared with you for learning. We look forward to welcoming you for our 3rd day of this certificate course on 12th March at 6 p.m. The theme for day 3 is Governance Structures in Combating Gender-Based Violence, and the experts are Professor Bijay Lakshmi Nandaji, Professor Veena Vaswani ji, and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good evening. Thank you.